Hello, my name is Sandy Adomaitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey writers, what an excellent show we have for you today. We're going to talk to two Page Awards judges, Victoria Lucas and Laurie Ashbourne, about how they evaluate your screenplays. Whether you're just starting out or have a script in the competition, you do not want to miss this inside talk. Victoria Lucas is an independent producer who has developed scripts for projects starring Antonio Banderas, Scarlett Johansson, Wesley Snipes, and Hilary Swank. Among her favorite projects is the highly acclaimed coming-of-age film, The Island of Bird Street, awarded the Silver Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival. Victoria judges a variety of genres, including drama and historical films. Laurie Ashbourne began her film career in Disney animation, and over the past 20 years, she has worked as a story consultant, writer, and producer for Disney, Amazon, and many independent producers. She has over 30 features and short films to her credit, including her new family feature, Christmas Time, which is currently in post-production. As a Page judge, Laurie reviews scripts in several different genre categories, including family films, comedies, dramas, and shorts. Let's get started. Laurie and Victoria, thank you so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout. How are you both today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having us.
Before we get started, would you like to play a quick round of Would You Rather?
Sure. I'm game.
Victoria, you answer first, and then Laurie. How's that?
Okay.
Would you rather be feared by all or loved by all? Victoria.
Ooh, those are my only two options?
Those are your only two options.
Then I guess I'd have to go loved by all.
How about you, Laurie?
Well, I'd love to be loved by all, but I think I'm actually feared by most.
Okay. This is us getting to know the judges.
Anytime you're judging someone, they are afraid of you. Anytime a writer pushes send with a script and it goes to a production company, you are the enemy if you're the reader. You are the one who's going to stop their script from getting to the person who's going to recognize its brilliance and say yes. So there is a lot of fear in this job, which I don't like.
Exactly.
Because the reality is we want to find brilliant scripts. That's the whole purpose of this.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yes. Victoria, would you rather be permanently transported 100 years into the future or 100 years into the past?
For the movie business, to the past. I think that being in the 1920s and 30s in Hollywood, as long as you were in the movie business, would be so exciting. As you know, Sandy, my grandmother was a screenwriter in the silent era and beyond, but in the silent era. And her stories about how exciting everything was, it was all new. They were making it up as they went along. That's what I would love.
Yes. Laurie?
I would say the past 100%, regardless of whether I was in the movie business or not, even though it probably would be. I think I was a flapper in another life.
Would you rather read or play video games? Victoria?
Read.
Laurie?
I would say read 100%, yeah.
Victoria, would you rather be chronically underdressed or overdressed?
I think that's a given. I am underdressed.
Okay. Laurie?
Chronically overdressed or underdressed? Well, I mean, I like to dress up, but I'm typically underdressed. So if that answers it.
And the last one, would you rather watch Netflix or Hulu? Victoria?
Oh, dear. That's a nasty one because it varies so much. If each one has something I want to see, I think I'd have to go with Netflix because they're more internationally oriented.
Interesting. Laurie.
I'm going to go with Hulu. They've surprised me with a lot of stuff lately.
They seem to be very creative right now.
Yeah, I would say if my habits had to answer the question, lately I've been on Hulu much more than Netflix. Although Peaky Blinders is coming on tomorrow, so yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think our writers out there have a little bit more understanding of Laurie and Victoria, so we shall begin. As a judge for the Page Awards, we ask you to evaluate a script based on 10 elements equally: premise/concept, presentation, structure, plot, pacing, characters, dialogue, theme, style/tone, and commercial potential. That's every script that comes in. That's how it's judged. But you are not a robot. You have feelings and thoughts. Victoria, what's the first thing you look for when you start reading a new script?
Well, it has to grab me, and every writer has heard this forever. It needs to let me know what the story's about, give me an idea of the genre. Now, you can have a genre mashup, or you can change genres and do twists and things like that. But I have to know what world you're setting up and what characters I'm going to be following. If you can do that, I'm with you for the script.
How about you, Laurie?
Yeah, I'd say the first glance, I look at the page overall, like without even maybe reading just the first sentence or something. And it shows me if I'm dealing with a writer that is in command of their craft. And then I know sort of like whether I need to, lean into it or I'm going to have a difficult time with it.
So say there is half a page of setup, because it's really important to the writer that you understand what's going on.
Right.
Is that good or bad?
It depends how it's presented. If it's a half a page where there's cadence within the sentences, meaning you can visualize how the director would handle each sentence because of the way that it's laid out on the page, versus in a half a page of sort of like a continent of text. There's a huge difference between the two.
Victoria, do you have any?
Yes, I do. And I'm going to follow on to what Laurie said. If you need time to set up what we are going to be seeing on screen, that's what you need to do in a as concise and vivid and cinematic a way as possible.
Right.
Sometimes I get a script that is literally that's very literary, that almost is like you're reading a book. And that's not what a script is. And you have to plow through it. And I do plow through it, of course. I read every word of every page of every script. But when you're plowing through something, it gets very difficult to catch what I'm going to see on screen. Right. The very best scripts, and it's only happened to me maybe a handful, 2-3 times, maybe a few more times in my life, where someone said, "Oh, have you seen that movie?" And I said, "Yeah, wasn't it great?" And then I realized, no, I hadn't seen the movie, but I'd read the script.
Yeah.
And the script was so vivid that I thought I watched the movie. That's gold, and that's wonderful, and that's what you're aiming for. A script isn't a literary piece of material. It is a blueprint for a movie. And getting that action and description at the beginning of the script, so we know what world we're in, we know who the characters we're going to be following. It's hard. It's very hard, but that's what grabs me at the beginning.
Yeah, I take that as that sort of blueprint analogy a different way, because you do hear that a lot. I actually look at it as more of a recipe to a meal. And the reason I do that is because there is there is an order in which you use ingredients and steps within a recipe that makes the meal come out, or makes the whatever you're cooking come out the best way possible, right? So if you follow the steps, if you follow the order, and don't just sort of like throw all the ingredients in a pot and hope for the best, it adds to the presentation of what's going onto the plate.
I really like that.
I'm going to steal that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
do a whole book
you don't
on that,
put butter
Laurie.
on a piece of bread before you put it in the toaster. I mean, it's that sort of rudimentary.
Right.
But there is a
right.
reason for how and when you present things in a screenplay.
Which comes down to structure.
Correct.
Really? Yeah.
Right. Victoria, if you were forced to pick, what do you think is the most critical element of a great screenplay?
Yeah,
that's a tough question.
Forced to pick is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And a lot of it depends on what your genre is. Because in a romantic comedy, the most important thing are the characters and the setup and the situation. In a drama, it's slightly different. In a horror film, it's less the characters and more, well, Laurie, what do you think?
The answer that you said previously, structure is the main thing, because structure is so vastly misunderstood. It's not just sort of like the 3-act structure, and it's not just like if it's a romantic comedy, it's not just like boy meets girl sort of thing. Structure is actually the synergy of everything. It's the synergy of the character arcs and the plot and what's on the page. And it's how it all works together. It's like a Rubik's Cube. And I think so many people get structure wrong because they don't understand that it's how everything works together. The movies that we watch over and over again, no matter what the genre is, like if it's When Harry Met Sally or Goodfellas or, an animated feature like Frozen, why they're watchable time and time again is because they're structured within an inch of their lives. The structure is so perfect. Really always sort of hinge everything on that. People are sort of like, they almost think of structure as like a bad thing, like, well, you're boxing me in, but it's not, because it's misunderstood.
Right. It is misunderstood. We do have, people think it's just the beginning, middle, and an end. But as you say, within each scene has a structure. Right. In each sequence, another structure. And that was my sort of analogy for the blueprint, because you have to have the foundation before you put up the studs, before you put up the framing, before you put up the sheet. All of that stuff has to come. Right. And some writers, I mean, if you put 6 writers in a room, there's 7 ways of writing, right? Each writer has his or her own way of writing. I know some writers who just sit down and just let the characters tell them what to do. Other writers work out everything with beat sheets and outlines and things like that. I worked with one writer, brilliant writer, who would simply go to the Hollywood Reservoir, and he would walk around the path along the Hollywood Reservoir for weeks. I had the studio calling me, begging me for pages. Everybody wanted pages, and his agent said, he's not ready, almost. He worked it out in his head so that he literally saw the movie. And then he went home and he wrote it in a course of about 4 days.
Wow.
So every single writer's different, but every script has to have a structure, whether it's innate or not imposed, but set up.
And I think a good thing to think about this for newer writers is, after you do it you're not going to sit down on day one and figure it all out, but you can learn.
Yes, some people have, as I say, an innate feeling for it. When they write a scene, the scene itself has a beginning, middle, and an end. And other people don't. They're great at characters and dialogue, but not so good at structure. But yes, of course you can learn. Of course.
Yes. Laurie,
yes.
What are some of the most common beginner mistakes that keep a script from winning a competition? Or just being a good script?
Yeah, I mean, it's winning a competition is a very subjective accomplishment. I would say what what sort of stops me from pushing a project forward is typically it's not the idea. There's a million great ideas out there. It comes down to the execution of it, and that execution can be very subjective. But there are things that can really help give it the best chance possible. I mean, the simplest thing is just in the presentation. That's the one thing that puts everybody on the same level. So why not take advantage of that?
Right.
Kind of the no-brainer of it. The rest of it, it is subjective, but I think the one thing that really makes every story work is making us feel the emotion of it, making us feel for the characters. And typically where beginning screenwriters miss that mark is because they explore characters through dialogue and dialogue only. It's hard to get that emotion when you imagine you're just going to be listening to talking heads on the screen. There needs to be a balance of the visual and the verbal. That's sort of what I'm always looking for.
What came to my mind when you said that, if you write a description about a character and you just say they are the wittiest, funniest, everyone loves this person, and then in the dialogue, there's not one funny thing that the person said.
Well, there's two things wrong with that. One, that would be a bad character introduction because you want that to be obvious when you are seeing the character on screen. A case in point is how the Coen brothers introduced the dude in The Big Lebowski, with him and Ralph sniffing the milk. They literally just said, this is a guy in Bermuda shorts. It's somebody with whom casualness runs deep. That was the character introduction. And as soon as he started acting and speaking, we saw that in real time.
Great description of that.
How about you, Victoria?
Following on to that, beginning writers sometimes forget that people are revealed as much by what they do as what they say.
Right.
Yes.
You could have somebody pretending to be, talking glibly and easily and everything. But if they're flicking their ankle back and forth or their eyes are darting around or something of that sort, then we know that they're nervous, they're on edge or something like that when the dialogue doesn't show that. You have to remember that this is a visual medium. So you want to show what is happening on screen in the most concise way you can, but to show what's happening, like the decision to make him sniff the milk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just brilliant. And if it can be off, just a little unusual, a little off center, all of a sudden the reader and the viewer, when in the movie shot, is going to be captivated, just like we were captivated with the dude.
I know both of you have a wide range of experience and you've reviewed scripts in many different genres. But what genre do you most often read and evaluate for contests, for the Page Awards? Anyone who wants to take that one?
Well, I in my career early career as a development person, I worked for a number of different companies, and some of them did action adventure. I worked for a while for a company that did a lot of horror films, which I loathe. I'm just loathe them. But I had to learn what made a good horror film and to look for it. So because I've had a fairly wide-ranging career in development before I became a producer, I'm pretty comfortable in almost any genre. I read historic films and drama.
How about you, Laurie?
So for me, I started in the industry in the animation sort of world. And so I get a lot of family genres given to me. But just like Victoria, once you've done this for a long time, you learn what works in any genre. You learn not to sort of put your personal preferences or what you're working on at the studio level to get in the way of what you're judging, because you understand the practicality of what makes a good script.
I thought that was interesting what you were just saying, that you might read a little differently, or did I misunderstand?
Not differently. If say you're working for a studio that happens to specialize in family animated content. That doesn't mean you don't understand what makes a good drama or what makes a good romantic comedy or what makes a good horror film. It doesn't, just because you work in one genre primarily doesn't necessarily mean you can't be a good judge of other genres.
Each genre has its own, for example, in a horror movie, the villain is massively important. I mean, that's more important than in a lot of other genres. In a sci-fi thing, the world that you're creating is maybe the most important thing.
Right.
But it all comes down to, is this a good movie? And yes, we can adjust our expectations. But if you are working as a development person or a producer working for a production company, you have to keep an eye out for what your company makes.
Right.
Yes. It's, you can give me the best horror film in the world, but if we make romantic comedies, I can't do anything.
Victoria, you're leading me to my next question. Let's take for you historical films. Mm-hmm. Is there any specific advice you'd like to give to writers who are writing historical dramas?
Well, generally, when you're writing about real people or real situations, I don't like to see the seams of the research. A real challenge is to know the world of the period and the characters and everything so strong that you don't call attention to the research. Sometimes people just throw everything they know about the Boer War or Victorian England or the suffragette movement or things like that. They throw everything they know into it, and you're just sort of plowing through saying, great, this is wonderful historical background. Where's the story? Where's the character?
Victoria, I love that. That is so spot on.
That's a great point.
It's just like, just because I walked by Lake Erie in the script or your character did, doesn't mean we have to know everything about the canal.
Again, I love it when they plunge you into a world and you have to sort of figure it out as you go along. If you're in ancient Egypt and you realize that, the pharaohs used to marry brother and sister to keep the lineage going. And, you sort of catch on to it as you're going and you're immersed in it, but you're not being lectured.
Yes. Laurie, do you want to take animation?
Sure,
sometimes I feel animation is so great, and sometimes it just doesn't get the spotlight like a drama or something like that.
Yes.
So let's talk animation.
First off, there's a big misnomer that animation is a genre, and it really is not. It's a medium,
Correct. Yes.
Adult animation versus. So for family animated films, there is probably the thing that's most prevalent in scripts that I see is that they don't leverage the medium, and they also don't take into consideration sort of the roller coaster of emotions that these films have. Case in point, like any of the, sort of Pixar / Disney or even Illumination or any of the major studios' family animated films, they don't pull any punches with any emotion. I mean, you have parents dying, you have, really horrific things happening to young characters. And you also have, extreme highs, like really funny moments and laughter and joy. And some of it's through song, but it doesn't even need to be. But, so that's the biggest misstep that I see, is that they don't take into consideration that roller coaster of emotions that their intended audience expects. And a lot of that just simply has to do with attention span. Like, to keep the younger audience members engaged, you have to deliver stories in a certain way. And that's why those films succeed the way they do, is because, we'll go back to what we were talking about earlier. They're structured to death to hit these marks.
There's a saying in the industry that a good beginning keeps you reading, but a strong ending makes or breaks your screenplay. What's your criteria for a strong finish? Victoria, do you want to take that first?
I'll definitely take that first, but I also want to start, a strong finish starts with the first page of the script.
Right.
Because, if there's something wrong in the third act, usually you go to the first act to fix it. A lot of people fiddle with scenes as opposed to, again, we're back to structure, going back and restructuring the story so that the ending becomes more compelling.
Right.
I find so many scripts, you could take the first 10 pages out and start the script on page 11, and that's where you should start it. So many people spend too much screen time setting things up, introducing characters, showing us things that are not important instead of getting the movie started. So by getting the structure of the first act right, the beginning right, it sets up the ending. Now, endings are tough. A lot of scripts have great first acts. I mean, a good number of scripts. A good second act is tough, and a good ending is so it's to get everything together. I remember reading a script once. My producer was going to the airport, getting ready to go on a plane, and I happened to pick up this script from the slush pile. And as I'm reading it, this little voice in me say, "Please stay good. Please stay good. Please stay good." And I got to the end and I quick called him up. He's getting ready to board. And I said, "I found it. I found our script." Unfortunately, it has not yet been produced, but it's getting close. It's getting very close. But a good ending actually starts with the beginning.
Victoria, could you explain what a slush pile is?
When you're starting a company, you go to the agents and you say what you're looking for, what kind of thing. And then they go through their huge inventory of unproduced screenplays. And in the olden days, they would literally come in, in manila envelopes, and you'd have a pile of scripts in your office. Now it's electronic and it's in your folder, but it's still the slush pile, the things that everybody else in the business has passed on, and you have to try to find. Because you're starting out, you don't have a track record, and the agents aren't sending you their top stuff. You have to see if maybe there's something in that pile that's going to be good for you.
And that is your slush.
Slush. Publishers use that term too, the slush pile. The lowest creative executive is usually assigned to do those piles.
Laurie,
Yes.
Did you want to say anything in addition? I think I kind of boxed you in with animation. Is there anything else maybe about family film, even though I think that you brilliantly folded it in? Is there anything else about family film?
Family films are very broad. That's a very broad category. If you step outside of sort of what we know being targeted to the younger audience members, like, if you look at something like Spider-Man could be considered a family film. So in that regard, it's knowing sort of what you can get away with and what's marketable in sort of that PG-13, how much sort of language you can get away with, how much sort of questionable content, whether the characters are drinking or smoking or cursing, those sort of things tend to find their way into a lot of projects that I get that are labeled family film. A lot of times people will enter something as a family film just because it's about a family. And that's completely different. That's, you could have a horrible family drama that is not intended for family audiences. But so there's a lot of sort of misconception about what makes a family film.
Interesting.
So the main thing is to understand who you envision watching this. If it's for children, then you should make sure that you don't have questionable content. If it's sort of younger teens and up, it sort of depends on what tone you're going for, what your style is. There's certainly some very sort of risque content out there for teenagers, but they know their place. It's on HBO or it's getting an R rating, and they know that and they're fine with that. But I think writers often don't understand sort of what an executive has to go through to market a film.
Right.
If you're going to go for the edgy factor, you lose half of your marketability. So, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's, what your goal is, but you just have to be aware of that. And sometimes it's enough to turn an executive off if they're like, oh, well, no, I can't send this to PG-13. It would need a complete, rewrite or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I guess you could start at Gilmore Girls to Euphoria.
Yeah, exactly.
And then try to find that pocket where
that's exactly right. The way to find that pocket is to sort of explore the content that's out there and look for something that you think is your audience as a barometer, whether it be Gilmore Girls or Euphoria. If you know that that's the tone you want to set and the audience you want, then go all at it, like own your lane, basically. But
I like that.
Yeah.
Victoria, what about trends? Should a screenwriter try to write something that takes advantage of a current trend?
In the movie business, that's very problematic because by the time a movie comes out, it's been known in the film world for 2 years, 2.5 years. In this business, nobody wants to be first. Everybody fights to be second. They don't want to be the first person to do, a sci-fi movie until Star Wars hits. And then everybody wants to do a sci-fi movie until that trend is over. So chasing trends can be very difficult if you are an aspiring writer or someone who doesn't really have much contact with the industry or ability to get things. Now, the bigger trends like genre mashups, which, things go in cycles in this business. I'll use one of my favorite examples, but it's an older movie now, but Get Out. When it started out as a sort of a relationship thing, and then the mashup for the horror part came in, and then, it was such a clever way to change genres in the middle of the movie. That kind of trend, I think, is really an interesting way to approach all different kinds of genres. Why don't you take something that is a romantic comedy and you think things are going to go well, and then there's, the subway accident or something. And now you can take, a lot of writers go to fairy tales or myths or things like that, and they'll take the myth of Persephone and they'll update it to 21st century Chicago or something like that. And that's a good way to take something and give it a fresh twist. That's not a trend exactly, but it's a way to approach material in a fresh, new way. You're not chasing the trend, you're chasing the freshness.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. How about you, Laurie?
So for chasing trends, I would definitely say no, for the very same reason that Victoria does, because it takes a long time to make a project. TV is even longer. What I would recommend, though, is to explore writing in a couple of different genres. And therefore, when somebody says, I'm looking for the next great romantic horror or whatever it is, you can say, oh, I have one of those. And it may need some dusting off, or it may need, a polish, but you may, in writing sort of what may seem obscure, you may be one of those people that ends up with a Get Out or something like that. So, there's a lot of merit to telling writers to write that effort script. And that script that you would, if money was no object and you just wrote, throw everything into it, but still a good story, like something that really pushes the boundaries. Write that, and you never know. Those are the things that somebody will, like a Jordan Peele that did Get Out. That when his comes out, you can say, "Oh, I've got one of those," and then you're not chasing a trend. You're right there with it. In other words,
Laurie brings up a really good point about writers trying different things. And I sometimes suggest to writers that they just write scenes. You're not writing the script, you're just writing scenes, and try writing a romantic drama scene or a horror scene or some different scene. If you think you're a science fiction writer, well, first of all, science fiction is an interesting thing because you got to have a story. It's just set in a different world.
Right.
But try things. Yes, a lot of writers don't want to write unless it's for a specific purpose, but sometimes you might find that you love it. If you haven't tried writing a horror film, maybe you'll find out you're really good at it and you're not committing yourself to do a feature film.
Right.
Try just writing a scene or two. That's what I also tell writers when we're working on a script and we say, you know what, maybe we need a sequence in this scene where we do that. And I said, can you just write it and we'll see if we want to use it? And
Yes.
there's such hesitation because they don't want to write something that isn't going to be in the movie. But sometimes just the act of writing, the physical act of sitting down at the computer and typing or handwriting, whatever you do, can bring out the creative juices get flowing and you think about something you wouldn't have ever thought about before. So write. Just keep writing.
My last question for you both. What would you say to a screenwriter who knows they wrote an excellent script, but it doesn't win or place in a competition? Laurie, you want to take that one first?
There's no one way into this industry. Everybody's entry point into this industry is different. Every writer that you talk to that has content produced, you will get a different answer as to how they got their sort of break in. So don't be discouraged if your script doesn't place or advance or win or whatever, because you are one of many, and the main thing you have to understand in this industry is that not to take it personally. It's a business first and foremost. It's show business. So if your project doesn't appeal to somebody, it doesn't mean it's not going to appeal to nobody.
Right.
So keep plugging, keep going, keep writing. What I would suggest is don't hang your aspirations on just one script. I know so many writers who write one script and they rewrite it to death and they pitch it for years and years and enter it in competition, the same script over and over and over. Write something different. And like we were just saying, sooner or later, that one that you loved and that one that you worked so hard on, there will be a time and place for it. But keep writing other things in the meantime.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that. The competitions are a great avenue.
Yeah.
Just they really help, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. I like that.
Correct.
No, and I think Laurie's idea about writing is, more than one script. So often I would get a script and I'd read it and I'd say, gosh, that's really, what an interesting voice this writer has, And I'd call the agent or the writer and say, I really like the script. I have something in development that is, it's the same genre. It's not the same story or anything, but it's the same genre. And I just, I can't do anything. What else do you have? If the writer has something else, I say, please let me see it because I want to see it. If they say, no, I don't have anything else, it's like, oh, well, gee, thank you so much. And, that's the end of the story. So often you want to see another sample of the writing because you want to see if you can do something with that script if you don't have it. I always tell people before they move to LA or something, always have 3 pretty good finished, polished scripts ready to go. They can be in the same genre or different genres, whatever, but have that and have something else sort of that you're percolating. Writers should always, when you start marketing one script, you should be working on another because the creative aspect and the marketing aspect are so different.
Right.
So when the marketing goes south and you're so pissed because the person who got all the way up to the top and then the producer said no, at least you're still working on your script that you're creating and coming up with new things.
100.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you as a writer are asked for another sample, it's not because they didn't like your first sample. They liked your first sample. They want to see more.
If they didn't like your first sample, they'd never ask what you have. I guarantee you.
Great.
When I ask, what else do you have? That means I really liked it. I just can't do anything with it.
Right.
So that's a good thing for our writers to walk away and know that, yes, it's a good thing. They want to see more.
Yeah. You should dance in the street for that. I mean, the only thing better would be, say, whip out the checkbook, right?
Yes. Victoria and Laurie, I so appreciate you sharing all this knowledge. And it really shows me the passion you have and how much you love writers. Thank you so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
Thank you.
It was great fun. Thanks.
That's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and thrive. Till we get to hang out again, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards. Executive producer, Kristin Overn. Producers, Terry Sampson and Sandy Adomaitis. Music by Ethan Stoller.